The April 24th meeting of the Plan Board. Ms. McMullen, if you could read the roll call.
Yes, Robert Ackerman.
I'm here.
Jamie Bell. Tina Certain. Nicholas Hill.
Here.
Robert Murmer.
Here.
Joshua Nay.
Here.
Jason Sanchez.
Here.
Stephanie Sutton.
Here.
You have the quorum.
Fantastic. If we could have a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. I don't think have we ever had a not pass unanimously?
I don't think so.
No?
Sometimes we have amendments, though.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Can we get a motion to approve? Holy moly, what is this?
Sorry, I just noticed
You're going wild.
slight, I think error in the
Yeah.
minutes. I just wanted to see if we can clarify that.
Yeah, go for it. Point it out.
Yeah, so it's E1, the old business community meetings with text notice change. Currently it says approve the petition as recommended with staff conditions with amendment to condition 5 for the Office of Communications and Marketing to work with the City Commission on improving communications, including text messages. It was actually supposed to be a request to the City Commission that they work with the Office of Communications, since we can't direct the Office of Communications or the City Commission to do anything.
Okay, I think we can make that change if everyone's in agreement.
Yeah. I think it achieves the same goal, but yeah, I think the way you're putting it is actually the way it can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if we could get in the habit of just ordering them to do stuff and they did it, we'd be okay.
So,
Be a funny way of doing it. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that
with
we
that?
approve the agenda, the minutes as amended by Dr. Murmer.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes unanimously. If anyone here has public comment that is not tied to one of the two items on the agenda, you will have 3 minutes to say your piece. Now's your time to shine. And Mr. Shepherd, if I could just have you say your name for the record.
Yes, Donald Shepard, Citizens Review, People's Representative. What I want to talk about is how the city is allowing trailer parks to stay open and housing complexes stay open with electrical and water and sewage being outdated 104 years. I've heard that some of them 77 years, others, and they're not reporting it. They just resell the place and it goes on to the next person, not telling the next person what's wrong with the sale of the property. This has been going on at the Lamplighter Trailer Park, which is now called Bedrock and Pinewood Estates. The electric out there has a cable that's like, I'm going to say 9 inches in diameter, and it is rotted over the years. And when there's GRU coming out and doing couplings to it, what good is it when you have to shut the whole park down at the time you're doing this install? No matter what section of the park it is, and these complexes are the same way, and plumbing, people use their facilities and then it backs up into their apartments or their trailers, and this is going on citywide, and this needs to be addressed. I would like it to be addressed so that the people are not having to pay for plumbing people to come out, and then the plumbing people say, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is ate up too bad in the ground. We can't do nothing," and it's like leaking in the ground, and the electricity being rotted like that causes arcs. When it rains, you can see like the ground currents from the point A to point B, from the bulks to your unit or your trailer or your apartment. These are things that people tell me that I said I'll advocate in your behalf, and that's what I'm doing here today, is advocating in behalf of the people. Another thing I like to talk about is, if I got time, is that the homeless programs. I have went through the whole homeless programs, and it takes you 2 to 6 weeks to get on a list. And then after that, you're still not called. You know, I've been evicted from the trailer park in which I'm in, and haven't paid rent in those 3 months, and no contact from anybody saying, well, you'd pay the money to so-and-so. Okay, first time they did it, I had to pay to the courts. Second time, nothing yet. And so this is something that is going throughout our city with these students. They pay these contracts and pay anywhere from $1,200 to $2,200 a month, and then they find out there's something wrong with the apartment and they have to move out because of plumbing, and it goes into the problem, and they want to charge the student or the people. No, this needs to be stopped. The owners or of the property, they need to make a move towards redoing this, and I don't know where this is going to go, but we need to stop this so that these people get help. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Sounds like a code enforcement issue.
Yeah.
We can certainly follow up with Mr. Shepherd if there are code enforcement issues, certainly.
Okay. Thank you.
And I talked to GRU about it, and they're supposed to get back to me tomorrow, and I'll know more in the next meeting.
Okay. Hopefully that works out. Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that wants to speak for 3 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Emily Taylor, and I am a resident of the Sugarfoot neighborhood on Newberry 34th. I am here tonight because it has come to a lot of our attention in the neighborhood that there's a 2¼ acre parcel right in the front. The address is 3755 Newberry Road, and they are investigating what it would take to move from an RSF1 to an MU1 zoning. And so in October 2024, they had a meeting that I believe Mr. Sanchez was at, and they received some information on some of the logistics that would go into it. But just to contextualize this parcel goes like way into our neighborhood, like lots of houses, one of my neighbors. So that's very concerning to people like myself, who is a single family person. Like, I just bought a house, starting a family next year kind of thing. Like, I see myself as the ideal person that Gainesville is trying to attract and wants us to live in these kinds of neighborhoods. So very concerning that what this zoning could do is put a car wash, a drive-through restaurant, a bank, what have you, right in the front of my neighborhood. And I understand we're not at the point of getting there. Obviously a petition or an application has not been brought forth, but I also know once zoning changes, your hands are tied, my hands are tied. So I'm really just hoping to understand what the main factors are that the board will consider with their application, what is the most appropriate or productive method for residents to communicate with city staff or with you guys. What do us as homeowners have to prove to prevent this zoning change from happening? And what opportunities do we have in the process? And I think, that's just generally it. I'm just trying to figure out what tools are at our disposal so that we can be proactive and this doesn't have to be ugly. But I'm sure you can all understand nobody wants like an Arby's in the middle of their neighborhood.
Yeah, totally get that.
But they also are legally well within their right. Consultants are going to push. Homeowners want to make money. So just trying to do this nicely if I can.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think I always look to city staff because I feel like this is an issue where I'm not sure when this is coming back to us, if it's coming back to us anytime soon.
Well, they've got it right in the front that it's potential commercial zone. Like there's a nice big sign right in the front of the neighborhood that they're selling. They just took it off of the market for residential, like actually pretending like they were going to sell their house to a family and have jumped the price up $200,000 and said now potential commercial development property. So that's why this is very concerning to us.
And this is right by the Ace Hardware, and
Yeah.
there's like Ace Hardware and the Latin supermarket. Lower
Yeah,
West
you'll
over
have
there.
that. It's the vet office are two weird road entrances, and then
Right.
literally right there. So it's not the big 35-acre one. That's the other concern. It's again what we thought was a single family home that now is potentially going to get rezoned, or
Okay.
they're seeking for it to be rezoned.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. I guess do I get answers to the questions though of what we can do?
Is there a way for them to be informed? There's going to be notices sent out, I imagine, to the neighborhood.
Yeah, for the, I think I'm on, for the status in as much as it is we have heard that there has been a for sale sign put out in front of the property. The last time that there's been any sort of formal communication with city and city staff is back in October, like you talked about. In October, for the first step meeting. And that information and those notes are public record. We can give those to you, and it sounds like you all have probably been given those already. That really is to the up-to-date information from the city staff side, the formal up-to-date information. What we have also heard is that there has been a for sale sign put on the property that is advertising it for a commercial use. Those are things that are outside of the city's purview and control. To this point, there has not been a formal application. And that really is where the city staff is. We've advised what you will see in the first step notes. Everything after that really is in the property owner's purview. What I can say is that when and if that property owner wants to move forward with a land use and zoning, they request an advertisement list of notices from the city. And then we provide them those addresses that are within the 400 feet, which is our requirement within code. So at that point in time, that is just one step that can sort of show staff and the public that this project is moving forward. Again, we have not seen that. We don't know if that is happening. But I think that certainly for you all, if you will give us your contact information, when that request and if that request comes in, we're absolutely happy to reach out to you, and we try to do this for the neighborhoods that are on our contact list as well. For when a project proposal comes in, for the neighborhood workshop or otherwise, that we let everyone on our list know that that is happening. And so there will be more steps to hear about this and hear about a proposed change, if there is one.
And they will be required to post a sign at the property as well before having that neighborhood workshop. That's their first step in, before they submit an application to the city, they've got to hold a workshop inviting anyone who's interested basically to come and hear about it and share their thoughts. So yeah, that's their first step. There's a couple of different points along the way. If they submit an application, it does get heard by this board and then by the city commission. So there's a couple different points during that process that people can voice their thoughts and things like that.
And giving a heads up to this board right now is a great idea.
Okay, very good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it seemed like they were able to use y'all as a resource, and I would think that the residents of the city should be able to use you as resources as well. And so I just wanted to
Definitely.
start that conversation and get clarity. So.
I would, excuse me, I would volunteer that at the point that a formal application comes in, it will be assigned to a staff member. And if you find out who that is, you can contact them directly, and they'll be able to tell you what's gonna happen and in what order.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
thank you.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, it'd also be a good idea to keep an eye on the property for if they submit a formal application and it gets to that point where they have to have a public meeting about it. Those mail notices only have to go out a certain 100 feet. So just keep an eye out on that property for a sign from the city that notices an upcoming public meeting, in case you live outside of that
I do,
mailing zone.
but yeah. They have 2.25 acres, so there's not a lot of people within 400 feet.
Right.
Ask some, I guess that would be my concern. To say within 400 feet, there's one house right across the road. So I think that's gonna be like two houses within 400 feet of them. And that seems like really, really limited neighborhood announcement. And I'm also just wondering,
They're gonna put out a sign too, that's gonna have the city seal on it.
They'll have a bright orange sign on the property.
and is that the invitation process? When you say invite to a public meeting, is that the invitation process, a sign?
It's sort of the start, if I may. So that would be the first start. You could see a change in the signage. So right now you're seeing a realtor is putting out a commercial sign. Another sign that you may see, maybe, if they decide to move forward with the formal process, is their own sign that says there's a neighborhood meeting and a workshop. And that sign is required to have contact information both for the developers and for where and when this meeting is going to take place. That's sort of step number 1.5.
And what's the visibility requirement for that sign? How visible and public does it, what is like,
It's gotta be visible from the roadway.
Yes.
the roadway? Which
The-
roadway?
The major roadways, and also if a planner looks at it and decides that it should be on a side roadway, then we'll put an additional sign.
So it
But
have to
also,
be-
that's the first step
Yeah.
for the neighborhood workshop, which is the private initiated part. We, as staff, also put out additional signs that are bright orange, very bright blue, that are on the roadways also, that tell you about this step at the plan board stage and going forward from there. So you will see changes to the signage, and there will be mail outs to the neighbors that are within 400 feet of the property edge.
Right, of the property line, not the house. So it generally captures like across all of
Across
the
the street.
roadways, yeah.
Yeah, so two houses, probably.
It might be a little
Maybe-
bit
maybe a
further
couple
and
more
it
than that.
depends, yeah. Depends on the width of the roadway.
And please keep bringing it up, and you can also email the planning department, sustainable development, and you can email the city manager's office and the commissioners.
Great.
It is
Thanks
not
very
a
much.
problem to keep bringing this up and making it, top of mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here that wants to speak on something that is not on the agenda? Seeing no one, I think we'll close public comment. Ms. McMullen, if you could read the first item into the agenda, please.
Yes, first item, 2025-233, libraries and daycares in single-family zoning text change, LD 2537, with a presentation by Ari Rabinovich.
Good evening, Chair and Board. My name is Ari Rabinovich. I'm a planner with the Department of Sustainable Development, and the item before you is LD 25-000037, Libraries and Daycare Centers. This is a text amendment to the Land Development Code, this is the result of conversations that have begun here, beginning around May 23rd, 2024. So this is the summary of the amendment. It is an amendment to section 30-4.16, the permitted uses table V4, which is permitted uses in residential districts, as well as a modification to the definition of libraries in 30-2.1, and this is a city-initiated text amendment. So here you can see the permitted uses table V4. Basically, all you're seeing is that daycare centers and libraries will now, or if this amendment is approved, will be permitted within the single-family zoning district by special use permit. And here's the amendment to the definition of public library that we have in the code today. So what we would do is add the words library or public library. It means a facility operated by a governmental agency to collect, organize, and make accessible educational, informational, and cultural resources to the general public. So just adding the words library or, this is because the permitted uses table that we have today has the word library in it. It doesn't actually say public library on our permitted uses table. So we would just be aligning the definitions with the permitted uses, including in the single-family zoning district. And here's the definition of daycare center that we have in the code today. It is any place, building, or location other than occupied dwelling where care is provided for 4 or more natural persons not related to the operator. Such care may be rendered day or night, and such term specifically includes a kindergarten when not part of a school, nursery school, child care center, preschool, and adult daycare facility, just for context on what this code change would include. And we do have one use standard for daycare centers, basically requiring a loading area with a turnaround driveway or other vehicular area for loading and unloading of passengers. The walking distance from the loading area to the main building entrance is supposed to be minimized, and a paved pedestrian path at least 5 feet wide with marked crosswalks shall be provided between the loading and unloading area and the main entrance of the building. So this is a request to permit daycare centers and libraries in the single-family zoning district with a special use permit that would be approved by you all. So this is important to note. So any of the proposed daycare centers or libraries that would appear in the single-family zoning district would be subject to these criteria, including consistency with the comprehensive plan, land use compatibility, monitoring for adverse impacts to health, safety, and welfare, automobile, bicycle, or pedestrian mobility, parking and loading, noise, glare, exterior lighting or odor, refuse service and loading, outdoor storage screening, accessibility of public utilities, screening and buffers, hours of operation, and land development code. So all of these criteria help to ensure that any proposed development would be context sensitive and account for potential impacts on any of the adjacent or surrounding properties in the SF zoning district. So the rationale for this proposal centers around the public benefit that would be added by providing these essential services to neighborhoods and their residents. These are community services which are compatible with the character of residential neighborhoods, especially when reviewed against the SUP criteria. Referenced in the staff report are some studies, including a study by Montana State University and the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, which found that investment in public libraries leads to improvements in school reading scores within the immediate and adjacent area where the library is placed. Also a study from Duke University showing that increased access to early center-based childcare leads to improved language skills. And then last is a study that that's referenced by the Center for American Progress, which identifies approximately 70% of all American children who have parents that are, all of their available parents are engaged in the workforce and who frequently have to make difficult choices around employment due to lack of childcare. So we would be increasing the availability of these resources and sort of trying to mitigate against that problem. The policy that is proposed, or the amendment proposed, is consistent with the comprehensive plan, particularly the future land use element, Goal 1, which encourages the city to provide a variety of housing, office, retail, and workplaces within walking distance of important destinations. 1.1.1, which would integrate civic facilities, workplaces, and schools into communities. 1.1.2, which relates to neighborhoods where jobs and daily needs are within walking distance of each other. 1.1.6, which would encourage the city to centrally locate community serving facilities. Goal 4, which relates to growth and redevelopment via neighborhood centers, and Objective 4.2, which is regulations that protect low-intensity uses, that is addressed by having the special use permit criteria applied to this change. So with that, I do thank you very much for your time. The staff recommendation is for approval of LD 25-000037, and I'm here for any questions.
Who's number 4? Oh, Mr. Nay. Mr. Nay.
Great job, Ari. I really appreciate it. I live across the street from a library. I love it. I live in a single family house, and my kids can put something on hold and they can walk over. They can just pick it up. There is the daycare center use standard of the loading area. I'm not a huge fan of that. Was straight. The whole like making somebody have a turnaround driveway or vehicular area, because I could see it being in certain neighborhoods like you're forcing this, when they've got other ways to unload and load, or maybe they're even walking their kids to this. It feels like you're gonna just make more pavement for that. I mean, I live across the street from a daycare. There is a circle driveway, and it's kind of a pain because they park on the sidewalk all the time, and I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of other parking on the street that they could park and just walk their kids across the street. But I'm not a fan of the loading area requirement.
Ms. Sutton?
I don't think it has to be like a circle drive. I think like a parking space is fine. But I do think having an area off of the road when you're like loading and unloading kids out of car seats is a good idea.
Do you?
Yeah.
I'm just messing with it.
So this is also not the code section we're like
Talking about?
amending right now.
Yeah.
This is in the use specific standards. So we could come back and talk about this.
I got you.
I think we may get to the use specific standards once we start digging into like drive-throughs and some of the other things that have use specific standards, but personally, I'm just glad that we moved this along quickly, and I'm happy to see it going, and I'm happy to support the application. So we may get to use specific standards later. Can you hold those thoughts?
I can, just this once.
Okay. Dr. Murmur?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I had the same idea as Ms. Sutton, but can you just confirm to me that when it says turnaround driveway or other vehicular area, that or other vehicular area means that, because we're talking about an SUP here, nobody's going to be mandating turnaround driveway, a larger driveway necessarily than they may already have, correct?
That's how I would interpret this use standard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can also add for some context for this specific use standard, we have applied that to parking spaces as well. So depending on the situation and kind of where it makes sense. And like Dr. Murmur brought up, if we're talking about this in terms of just the special use permit in the single family zoning, it would be a good opportunity to look at it on a case by case basis where it has that or vehicular area.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mr. Hill?
Can you go back to the definition of the library, if you don't mind, already? It's just interesting that we're adding in library, but it's explicitly says only by a governmental agency, when a lot of nonprofits run libraries. Is that anything that you guys considered? It seems like
Yeah.
you're nodding and smiling about that, so I assume you guys have talked about that?
We have had conversations about which entities would operate a library, and we figured in order to keep the scope of this text change relevant to the request by the plan board, we would mostly try and amend the uses in the zoning district, in the single-family zoning district. This just sort of cleans up the language and makes sure that our definition is matching with the use table. It was a broader conversation about who might operate a library and what that would entail. So that could potentially be a separate discussion if we wanted to have that.
Yeah, just like, Mr. Nay, just something to think about when it comes back up again, because I think that may be an issue in the future that we want to certainly encourage nonprofits to support local reading, so.
Think of the CMC?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. I do agree with, I agree with staff taking a more narrow focus on this right now, because I think the amount of times that you're gonna get a nonprofit, a non-governmental agency starting a library in a single family neighborhood is gonna be like, maybe it's gonna happen once over the course of 50 years. I don't know. We'll deal with it when we deal with it, essentially. Any other comments, questions? All right. Well, with that, we'll open it up to the public for any comments on this particular agenda item. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for comments or a motion. speak at once. Dr. Murmur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move to approve petition, or is it a petition? Text change LD 25-00-003720250327.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second and a third. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Passes unanimously. Ms. McMullen, if you could read the next item of the agenda, please.
Yes, next item is a discussion item, 2025-319, permitted uses in Transect zones, text change. So we do have, as you know, some backup attached on the agenda for this item. One of those items of backup are some maps kind of showing where the transect zones are located within the city and some zoomed in views of those. We also provided just the existing list of transect zones and permitted uses, as well as Board Member May had previously provided a list of proposed changes. So those two things are printed out for you all to look at side by side, kind of how they are currently. The document with the red text is what was formerly presented by Board Member May. And just a few other things in backup to try to help with the discussion. But we are looking for your guidance on kind of what your priorities are for looking at this issue and where you want to go with it generally.
So I thought it was fascinating that there's no U1s in the entire city. I think we should just get rid of it. If it hasn't been used by now, there's clearly no appetite for U1 in the city.
What's the difference between U1? What is it?
So,
It's a transect.
Single family?
Yeah.
and this is somewhat related to the question about DT versus U10 is what is the intent or the original intent in the naming system in the transect zones. So in only a halfway to answer your question is the U1 is intended that if in some way that the entire city switches to a transect zone methodology, that this would be the least intense, the lowest density, single family, if you will. And then also going up to in transect zone sort of methodology or the practice of it is that downtown is a central city center. And then all of those other U designations, whatever they are, 9, 10, as you guys have suggested otherwise, sort of filter down from there, both in their intensity, height, use, and otherwise. I do think that it is what you all have started to ask is we need to reevaluate this. Reevaluate what the baseline is for the transect zones and why do we have these things broken down in this way. What I'm suggesting or would suggest that, of course, putting all of this into place required a lot of effort and a lot of analysis and a lot of community feedback. Staff, of course, advice from you all is willing to revisit this, willing to look at this again. But it is an ask that, of course, has resources and time associated with it.
Right.
Whether whether your advice is really the best next step for us as staff for how you would approach certainly the transect zones here, but I think also leading into a couple of the other questions as far as the resources and staff time that could be behind this.
So I'll just speak for myself because that's all I can speak for. I appreciated the history that was included here of how transects came to be in Gainesville. I found U5 to be particularly interesting because U5 has always stuck out like a sore thumb in the code. It's denser than, it's both shorter but denser than U6, U7, I think even U8. And I think it's probably worth revisiting whether it makes sense to have U6, U7, and U8 not be as dense as U5. If it's fine for, if the whole idea was that this is supposed to be like a gradual lowering of intensity, going from less intense to more intense in a neighborhood seems a little silly. And also the fact that one only exists because people in College Park were like, no, I don't want that. It seems like it might have been better to make that area U8 to start. And so I think not just looking at the permitted uses, but also just some of the definitions of it, I think probably could use updating, probably could use cleaning up. The other thing I wanted to point out is that I think it would make more sense, and I think it would be clearer if we didn't have stories and feet as a sort of guiding of height, but rather just feet. You see it in, like, when you're looking, I was looking through the code, and it's like, okay, this can be 4 stories, or this can be 42 feet. Like, U4 can be 3 stories, but it can be 42 feet. U2 and U3 can also be 3 stories. Actually, U1 can be 3 stories, but 36 feet. It's a little arbitrary, right? Like, and I also think it's a little limiting in terms of if you're building a building, well, now you got to make sure your ceilings are a certain, whereas if you're just giving somebody, hey, 42 feet, if you want to do with it what you will, I think that'll allow for a little more flexibility. You might find that creative builders can fit a little bit more in there. Yeah, so that's my piece on on hype, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation now. Ms. Sutton.
So I have some detailed markups on the uses, but I'm going to respond to the chair's comments first. I would say that compatibility with a neighborhood has a lot more than just the density. So if you look at the allowable uses, there are things that are not allowed in U5. So it's really functionally more like an RMF district that doesn't allow all of the commercial uses that a U6 might. So zoning district's a lot more than density. It's the allowable uses too. And so I think you'll see a big change. When you go through that middle part of the table, there's a big transition that happens. The other thing I would say is I personally, think we should just leave U1, that we may get to a point that, we just changed a bunch of single family districts to SF, and maybe someday we make them all U1 instead. I do think, and some of my markups on this table, which I can, leave with staff or talk through as we get to people's specific comments, are to make that U1 column more specific with SF. And for example, the 2 things that we added tonight are not in this current U1 list, and so I'd want to make it consistent with what we just approved. And there's a couple of other things I marked up to make U1 consistent with SF. And U2 for the most part as well. I think the uses, will be pretty similar to SF. And then there was something else. What was your last point?
Height, stories
height.
versus feet.
I think we were planning to talk about height in
I
next
think
meeting,
that
but yeah.
the typical layperson thinks in stories. Architects definitely think in feet. What's interesting is when you get specifically into the higher transects and the bigger buildings, and when you start putting structured parking in them, you can get to the point where you get almost 2 stories of parking or 3 stories of parking within 2 stories of building. And so it gets a little complicated, but also as far as building massing and thinking about the compatibility, the number of floors is what the average layperson thinks. And a lot of time and effort actually went into those different things, and there were different exhibits drawn up with, you could do a 2-story house with dormers and or you could do a 3-story house with a flat roof. And so a lot of effort went into that, particularly again with the transect zones and going to visit the edges of these transition areas. So I don't feel that passionately about it. I think to make our code understandable to like the lay person, I think they think in stories, whereas like, you know, there is use for the height too.
I mean, I don't know.
I don't have a problem with having both. I work with people all the time. I have to translate the code. I've never had anyone complain about it, to be honest. Like,
It's just a matter of giving more flexibility in the building, you know, instead of the city telling it this, well, this has to be 3 stories. If you set on feet, then you're left to sort of be creative with the space. I don't know how many lay people are looking at the code. I think there's a handful of them that show up to meetings, and some of them don't look at the code either. I don't know how much that code, if that code is written for regular people, we got to rewrite the entire thing, because I don't think any of it is written in a style or language that regular people would be able to easily digest. So if the goal is to make that accessible, I think we've lost that thread years ago, and I would argue that every single city code in every city in America has a code that is not decipherable to lay people easily. So.
I would add, though, that there is a requirement for precision for people who use the code. And so we do need to have, I mean, I'm a lawyer, I could tell you that we have an attempt to make legal writing accessible, but the fact remains you still have to be able to make sure that you're saying A and not B, meaning you have to be explicit.
That's the problem. It was a problem with the comp plan that came before us. No, it's 2.
I just have some, you all can continue talking if you want. I have some additional background information on the U5 zoning district in particular from a staff report when, back in 2014, when this first began being talked about, if you're interested.
I'd love to. I think it's funny that it's that particular neighborhood that is really student heavy, that like if you were going to have mixed like commercial uses, that's one of the most walkable areas in town. That there is such restricted uses in U5 compared to even U4, U6. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for where that zoning code is applied on the map.
So it seems like it was partially the result of community feedback, that change was made. And this goes to kind of the point of a lot of work and effort went into like each individual piece of each thing that you're talking about. So it's just good to talk about. It's something we would include in further analysis of the background on each particular item. I was just looking through the staff report from 20, well, I guess it was probably updated in 2017, but so the U5 zoning district was created subsequent to a city commission hearing on March 30th, 2015. At the hearing, concern was expressed by residents from the College Park neighborhood concerning potential increases in permitted height and the addition of non-residential uses. That would have accompanied the plan board recommendation of U6 zoning within the core of College Park. At the same hearing, a property owner within the University Heights area expressed concern that the permitted density of U6 would essentially be too high. I should just read the verbatim. Expressed concern that the permitted density of the U6 zoning, which allows up to 60 units per acre with a special use permit, is a substantial decrease in density from the existing RH2 zoning in the area, which allows up to 100 units, and would have rendered several recently built multifamily projects non-conforming. So as a result of these community discussions, the staff developed the U5 zoning district as an alternative to the plan board recommendation. So it's sort of just gives you some context.
I think that's really good context. So what we find ourselves in, really every jurisdiction does, is are we trying to fit the city and the uses as they exist into some sort of rubric that we've created both at the plan board or on the staff level or the commission level? Is it U 1 through 10, or is it MU 1 through 10, or RSF, whatever? What has happened and does happen, and rightfully so, is it's a mix. It has been a mix between those. We decided to change to a Transect zone that does have its own arguments for why things should be a certain way. certainly by form, of course, is the Transect argument. But then also in the back and forth and the communication with our citizens and with the community, how does this actually make sense in our city the way that it has already been built? And so now, do we tweak this system that we think is a good system towards what we have, or do we start trying to force things that exist to fit into our system? It's a chicken and the egg argument. There's no right or wrong answer to that. And that, I think, is exactly what you all are asking for us to continue to look at here for the uses and certainly for the transect zones themselves.
Dr. Murmur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going through sort of making my own version of what Mr. Nay gave us. But there's a lot here, so I'm wondering if it would be helpful for the other planning board members as well as staff if I were to just talk about like the 4 biggest priorities that I see, or do you want me to go through it all? Or?
Basically, if you've got 4 big priorities above the rest, I think that's helpful to kind of guide us, because it is a lot.
So, and this is based on the need that I've observed throughout the community in my work as a community organizer. So first, the daycare centers, I think they should be just straight up permitted through all the Transect zones. It's nice if you have the closer the daycare center, the better, especially for our lower income residents who might not always have the most reliable cars, weird work schedules. So anything we can do to make it easier to have just small scale daycare centers, I think would be great. Second, light assembly, fabrication and processing. I think that in U4 and 5, it should be permitted. So we do lack space right now for companies who would love to come in here, take advantage of our highly educated workforce, but cannot find the space. We've lost at least 3 companies in part because of that reason. Same thing for research and development or testing facility. I think it should be permitted in U4, 5, and 6, because that's it's sort of related. There's, in a lot of cases, you want to do both some light assembly, light manufacturing, as well as some research and testing. Mm-hmm. And then finally, retail sales, I think should be either permitted or have a special use permit throughout, because I'm interpreting, and sorry, I don't have access to the internet, it started going out again, but retail sales would include groceries, correct? Yeah. And I think if we want more walkable neighborhoods and convenient neighborhoods, we want to be able to have corner stores. So to make them either permitted use throughout or special use permit would be great. So those are my 4 personal big priorities. And also just a reminder that I think we have unanimity on the board that drive-through should always be special use permit.
I agree with basically all of that. Dr. Murmur. Mr. Hill.
Yeah, I just want to echo Dr. Murmur. I think those were the big ticket items that I was kind of thinking of as well. So great work there. I did want to call out one change that is recommended, beyond all the good stuff that I see. The gasoline or alternative fuel station goes to special use permit instead of permitted. And 2 of the transect zones, some developers would call it being permitted now an entitlement. And so making those into special use permits is adding an additional regulatory step for them. And so addressing that, I'm not a lawyer, but is that a whole project in and of itself? The ability to address that? Is that even in the city's purview? And 2, what does that process look like if we were to take something that is permitted by right into something that is a special use permit process?
I asked Sean about that last week, and he said there shouldn't be a problem.
Great.
I mean, we changed all into Transects all at once, so.
So from permitted to special use permit.
We just can't go after you can't kick a gas station out to get grandfathered in, but.
Sure.
Yeah. But otherwise, yeah.
Yeah. It is an interesting concept, right? You're buying into a plot of land, not that I'm arguing on behalf of gasoline stations, but you're buying into a plot of land with certain expectations. And then suddenly you have a new process to go through that is subject to a certain level of board approval where you wouldn't have that if you just had it permitted by right, which is what they originally. But I'm happy to know that in this particular case, I'm excited. I agree with that stance. So that's good news to hear.
Mr. Nay.
I was just bringing it all the way back to what you were talking about in terms of stories versus feet. I'm the layest of layman up here on the dais, and like I don't understand. Stories don't make that much sense to me, and feet I can visualize, and maybe I'm different than most laymen. I definitely don't understand the code when I look at it. This is, what? What? Oh, there you went somewhere else. But yeah, that's all I had to say.
Ms. Sutton.
Just in summarizing comments, I think the ones that I want to see go to special use permit in general, I brought these up before, is car wash, drive-through facility, and the gasoline and alternative fuel station. I think those should just be S's wherever they're allowed. One question I have, and this may be to you, Josh, is there a reason why we're calling out indoor go-karts, and why would that not be considered indoor recreation? Like, is that not covered by indoor recreation?
I would currently consider it indoor recreation.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary if,
I just want to go kart drive.
I understand, but I think you could do it under indoor recreation, so I would strike that. I know you're passionate about it, so.
I'm all for making things simpler.
Those are,
And I agree with all your special use.
the other thing is, as far as like vehicular uses go, the vehicle sales and vehicle repair, we had previously not allowed in like the higher density transects, the U9 and DT. And I think those should probably stay not in U9 and DT. I don't think those are the type of uses that we're looking for in those really dense areas with tall buildings. So I like X those out on mine. I don't think we want auto related uses, particularly the repair and things like that with chemicals and stuff, in those super dense transects.
I just want fewer empty storefronts, so if somebody likes.
Yeah, but there is a lot. It's like the gas station where there is going to be a lot. Like if you use that for that, then the next person that comes in has got to do a lot of work to turn it into something that is not a vehicle.
But if you're doing vehicle sales, it's not. I mean, those fancy car
There are
dealerships.
I guess that's what I was going to bring up. The
Sales is
premium
one thing. I think services is quite another.
premium vehicle sales of vertical towers. I mean,
Each special use permit would run with each use.
Mhm.
Every single time a business wanted to do a change, it could completely be up in the air to this board.
Yeah, and just, I crossed off vehicle services and vehicle repair. I left the vehicle sales alone. That was existing. So I'm just saying your proposed change here for service and repair, I don't like. In those districts, I'm okay. I didn't cross off the vehicles.
Just making sure.
You can have your fancy car dealership in
I'm going to be a
downtown.
car salesman. You can go.
Sell your Lamborghinis and whatever you want to sell out of a storefront. Go ahead.
If I might jump in, so for some of these, of course, there are specific use standards for some of these uses. And if the advice is to move these to special use permit review by this board, it does become more quasi-judicial. And as it becomes more quasi-judicial, the more specific requirements, and you guys have heard me continue to say, please be more specific, but those specific requirements that you all can articulate for each of these uses are going to put the city in a better place to be able to argue and articulate whether something does or does not meet the standards that you all are looking for.
I would, to the list of things that we're discussing, I would add the food distribution center for the needy. Making that a special use permit seems to me particularly cruel, actually, given what we allow in so many other places, and that by the description seems to be doing a societal good. And so I would recommend that we allow that really by right across, from U6 up. You'd have to be, I think you'd appear pretty heartless to deny unless they really screwed it up or something, but like somebody comes to you and says that we're going to build a food distribution center for the needy, you want another bread of the mighty, I think it would be pretty rough to say no to that. And I think it would be, it's kind of the exact use that can't afford to spend a bunch of money going through the special use permit process. So if we could just make that by right, I think I'm strongly in support of that. I gotta keep looking at this thing because it keeps lighting up. Forrest, you were lit up, but I think you already said your piece. So.
I think I did, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I wonder if the original fear there was like it was, as colloquial term, like a soup kitchen and people would line up outdoors or something like that. Would that fall into that, or would that be in a separate category?
I think it would fall into that.
I'm all for it, by the way.
Right.
This is
Right.
I just wonder if that's where the original fear came from.
It's
in a
likely that
neighborhood.
was part of the conversation.
There would be a line out the door or something.
That is certainly where the separation of a lot of these uses comes from. And I'm sure the standard industrial classification code.
Yeah.
Long ago tried to put all of these in a very, very more federal specific category. And a lot of our code comes from that, and a lot of the separation of these uses, especially for services that are provided, for underprivileged, are really separated out in a way that we wouldn't do today, or at the very least, we wouldn't want to do it that way now. So, yeah, it's a good time to look at those to see if that makes sense.
Would and I'm sure somebody's already asked this in a separate meeting. This is a large list of changes. Is it more helpful for staff if we give you, the direct items that we want to address, and then some of these that are on here that, we haven't specifically addressed by name or addressed at a later date? Or what do you think is more helpful for us?
If you want to jump in, Brittany, or I'm happy to. So thank you very much for certainly asking where staff is, and certainly on the resources side. So we are moving forward with what we have discussed and what you all have requested of us to date and so far. So certainly for what you see here, the flattening of the uses for the MU1 and MU2, we're looking at those. Suggesting the name changes, we talked about that a little bit tonight. Like, what does this mean as far as research capacity and looking into this? And it is something that, of course, takes resources and time. What we have also done in the meantime, of course, is brought that alcohol beverage establishment conversation to the city commission, where bringing the conversation up about whether or not a feet distance requirement makes sense or not is, if you all saw conversation at the city commission level, a complicated issue. And what they have asked staff to do is analyze that, research that, and do public outreach and several different meetings while discussing this and researching the changes to it. So all of that being said, that those of course are tasks and asks on our time and resources for staff. So I think that what we still have given you here today and to date is on track, and we're on track. But for each of these asks, what we're going to really need to face and confront is, when are these going to come back to you all, and when can staff provide actual reasonable feedback for you all for each of these items. So even for the MU1 and MU2, what we're looking at for the tentative turnaround time for you all is in June. And that's at the top of this list from what you talked about in March. So if you take that same sort of process, you can shift each one of these things down by month and month to see what we're able to work on. That being said, We also are working on the comp plan update that is due to the commission in August. And that is something that is going to continue to take staff resources and time. Again, that does not mean that we won't be able to pursue any of these or look at any of these, but it is a resource commitment, of course. So just in talking about all of this schedule, again, I think that we're on track. But what I think, what you all can expect from us is if we stay on this path and this track and you all discuss each of these items that are on this sheet and tell us, I think probably you're the one that put this together. Tell us what we should be looking at. What, if you're able to, what are the priorities? What for each of these groups should we really be focusing on? Then of course for each one of these months, it is already a resource and ask to be able to bring something competent to you all to even discuss, first and foremost.
All right.
But we also want to do our analysis and due diligence beyond that. And so for each one of these, I think you can see that they are starting to shift. What we would like to do, if you all are able to stay, and I shouldn't even phrase it that way, and I apologize. Based off of this schedule, if there is discussion from you all for these items, I think in September, staff can come back and articulate to you a path for how we are going to do and present the full analysis for each of these items and get them back to you and the commission.
And I think to answer your question, it is helpful to narrow it down. I think is what kind of what you were originally asking was like, what is it helpful to prioritize the things and like, should we maybe focus on the things that you're calling out in particular? That would be helpful since, you know, as you can see, some of them will lead kind of off onto other paths. Some of them have use specific standards. But for me anyway, it is helpful to know, like Dr. Murmur's like, here's my top 4 things.
Yeah.
And especially knowing, you know, that those are actual issues in the community right now that should be prioritized is helpful too, I think.
Yeah.
Speaking of
So
Dr.
that,
Murmur.
the schedule that I just passed out, we added a few notes on there just to let you know kind of a couple, like what our thoughts are for upcoming schedule and a couple other points of things. So Forrest mentioned the comprehensive plan. We do expect to have a draft for public hearing to you in August for that. So that's kind of running in tandem with this other effort.
And is that a hearing or a workshop? Sorry, just to clarify.
Ideally it'd be a hearing, but yeah, we can kind of talk through as we go through, but ideally it'd be the public hearing.
Okay.
We're aiming for a hearing, and if leadership suggests or demands otherwise, then we will do something different.
Yes. Best laid plans, right?
Yeah. Then there.
Dr. Murmur.
Thank you. Yeah, so it sounds like everybody already, or staff already heard my priorities, so excellent, love that. But I wanted to go back to the discussion of the food distribution center for the needy. I agree in principle about just permitting those by right. I worry if that's what we recommend, it's gonna go nowhere because it's politically fraught. So what about an accessory use? Because most of these distribution centers, it's not the primary use anyways. Most of the time when you do have food distribution, it's done either as a bi-weekly or a monthly event, or, you know, 1 day a week. It's not typically the primary use of the building.
I don't know how the rest of the
This
board feels about it.
table, I mean, when you all see something come in, say it was church, and once a month they're gonna distribute food, they would be permitted like a church on this table. This is primary uses here. And then there's other accessory uses that don't, that are allowed, like, I don't know that this,
Would the question be like, could a church do that once a week, or would that be considered an accessory use?
They seem to do it already.
Yeah, I don't know that that's as much of an issue as you think. Now, Bread of the Mighty would be permitted as that use.
Right.
But a church would be permitted as a church, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's right, in terms of churches.
Or community organization,
Right.
whatever it is.
I will say, kind of just anecdotally, over the years of hearing people come in wanting those type of uses as the primary use, it does always come back to that requires a special use permit, things like that. It just anecdotally, does seem to be, it makes it harder for people to get into it. Like, we've had conversations with people, but we haven't had any applications for those out of all those conversations to go through the special use permit process. But that's just kind of my experience with talking to people.
Maybe a good time to spell that out when
Right.
it is not an accessory use.
Yeah, it's worth talking about for sure. It's a little bit, I think with churches, maybe we don't hear about it as much. Like, they're not coming to necessarily ask, can we do this on any random day? But somebody who's like trying to actually start up an organization that solely does this is trying to go through the steps of like establishing it as a primary use. But yeah, maybe it could be, I don't think our tables, not to complicate the conversation or introduce a whole new letter to the table, but something could be discussed just as an accessory use, I think. Yeah.
Mr. Nay.
I did watch the alcohol and Transect zone conversation, and one of the things, I was wondering if, I know staff, because it's coming from the plan board, it's not necessarily something you're flying that flag. You're just like, I'm presenting the information the plan board presented. I'm wondering if it's something like the chair or somebody from the plan board should also come, because I heard the questions from commission, and they were very much like, no. And there was kind of no pushback, but I was not expecting that from staff, because this is not right. Like, you're just presenting the information.
Is that a question?
I don't know what it was. I'll be straight. No, I asked if it would be good if the chair or somebody was there also, because we're passing lots of things.
Right.
And we've asked the commission if they wanted us to pass these things. They say yes, and then it gets to them, and they kick it into the void.
Well, the
They're
alcohol
like,
one is
well, we
particularly-
need to have more, conversations, and we want to, did a business owner ask for this? Like, all these sorts of questions that they ask.
So from staff side, we're always going to present at that time staff's research analysis and our feedback. And then we're also going to relay as much as we can what you all have said. If we are not doing a good job in that relaying, certainly the chair being there, you, Mr. Nay,
Nobody wants me
saying
there.
that this is actually what we want, then certainly do that. But that is, staff, we take that on as our job to clearly communicate what you all have advised. And we try our best to do that. In this particular circumstance, it is that you all have advised something, and staff also said, this is what has been advised, and we need to do more research.
Yeah, I saw that part of it. But I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's unfair to bring up the alcoholic establishment conversation, because staff warned us that it was going to be politically fraught, that there were a lot of cultural, historical issues with this.
And now, with what
So
happened,
then, and it turned out they were right.
I don't think it would pass now if you brought it to them.
I wouldn't try to apply that lesson to what we're doing here, because
Right.
this is much more in line with the original ask of the city commission. I think perhaps alcoholic beverage establishment, while in line with certainly with the ask, was in their eyes a little out of the bounds. I don't think that's
Okay.
something that they wanted to actually tackle, or at least certainly not a majority of them. I think
Right.
a few of them might want to tackle that.
I talked to some commissioners, and it seemed like I had there was people supportive, and then nobody made a motion, so I'm like, oh, okay.
And to go back to what the commission asked for, this, I think it's a good thing to circle back to what did the commission ask on the larger issue of what we're talking about with all of these breakdowns in zoning districts. The motion from the commission was direct the city plan board to examine expanded allowable uses for businesses and simplified code language for commercial zoning. So that just helps me kind of frame the conversation.
So we'll stick to allowed uses.
Yeah, it could go a lot of different places. I think the conversation we're having tonight is great for helping to narrow it down a bit.
Well, I'm wondering if we should just, put this up on the white and just go line by line, like see
What people support, or is that too complicated? It doesn't seem like there's that much that's changed or people will actually support.
In terms of your staff report, if this were to go to the commission, say all the strike through and underline, would your staff report kind of go use by use? And each one would have its own individual analysis. So, in your experience, I think, it seems like the city commission has a large appetite for analysis and community input, where this board is more, we kind of are more understanding of what we want to do with it, based upon our own expertise that we're bringing in. So I guess my ultimate question was, that staff report that it would take to develop, to do all of the uses, that would be substantial. And if so, how long? I know you gave us this timeline and I appreciate that, but I guess, that's tied into that question. How long would that staff report take to develop that research?
when the last staff report came back and there was a lot of stuff that staff didn't support, right? I remember Juan producing that.
Yeah.
It's-
and that was
Most of
what-
it listed on here.
Mr. Chair,
No.
if I-
Yeah. So,
Mr.
yeah.
Chair, if I might answer that,
Yeah.
there's a couple of different ways we could do it. We can do staff reports based off of segments like this and bring it back piecemeal, if you will, if that's the right word. Or we can listen to your feedback month by month, the way that these things are broken down, keep track of those, do what research and analysis we're able to do in time, and then bring you back sort of a larger omnibus feedback in September. And go from there and say whether or not we can lump a lot of these uses all in one thing, and then maybe pick out some of these things that are a little dodgy. You know, like we've seen bars are obviously dodgy. There's some other things in here, I'm sure you all, some you think are dodgy and are not, and some we think, we know are dodgy. And we can separate those out. Staff can provide that advice and separate those out. But if given your feedback and your priorities by these sections in these months, I think we can bring you back a really good product in September for more of an omnibus, wrapping all of these sort of non-dodgy things up.
Just based on your experience working with the city commission, do they prefer omnibus packages or do they prefer piecemeal, month by month updates?
This is tough. As an advisory board, I think that the commission likes something that is different from what they like of staff. So I can give you sort of two different answers. From staff, they expect a thorough analysis, a history, how we got here, and a full sort of setting the table for why even any of these decisions were ever made, and who are all the players, and why would we even change this? For advisory from the boards, largely what they like to hear is that you all have been thoughtful, that you have specific criteria or even specific cases that are in mind for why this is not working. And then they like to hear that. So it's two different answers.
Okay.
I will say, I don't think, just guessing, I would think they would rather, and actually, I don't know what I think they would rather, but it would be, I shouldn't say that, but like it might be more digestible to present it more as an omnibus type of thing versus I don't know. I
don't know if I agree with that.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, versus presenting.
One point of killing versus spread it out. You know, I think it's easy to get caught up in certain details and then they table the whole thing. If it's
Right,
omnibus, and then all that work that we've done here, you guys have done a lot of work on it, just goes to waste.
And actually, that's our experience with Gainesville Rise and all these
Yeah.
things where we did, and that was really from the previous mayor who wanted things in an omnibus way. And the trouble I noticed was that you ended up with a whole lot of people who found one thing they didn't like and they concentrated on that, but you had 20 people with 20 different things. And the whole thing got killed. We've done that a couple of times.
Yeah, I would just suggest, as far as the uses, an approach might be like moving this Transect table as one piece. And then a lot of these other categories are all within the same table as well. And so,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I would say kind of do Transects as one, and then like the modifications to that other table maybe
Yeah.
as
The
one
mixed use and
altogether.
non-residential.
And one comment I had is like in June, we list, suggest removal of BT and CP zoning from the code, but they're being discussed at different months. And so if we could move these like 3 categories from July up till June and talk about BT and CP at the same meeting, it might like facilitate that like code cleanup, just like suggested item. I also have like some other feedback on this schedule, and I think I expressed this last month or whenever we talked about DT to U10. I don't think that's a high priority for me as far as investment of staff time. I would echo that on the Transect zoning height and feet and stories. I think we have more important things to invest staff time on than those items. I don't think those are causing any issues.
Right.
There are a couple things that have come up that, like, one is more of a cleanup item, but one we had come up with sort of, something that we actually denied. I think there's some inconsistency in the code now between parking requirements in Transects and the fact that we don't have parking requirements in the general code. I think that's an easy cleanup item. Like, we just need to remove the vehicular parking requirements in Transects and say there's no minimum to be consistent with the rest of the code. That does confuse people, because if you're working with a developer and they have a property with Transect zoning and then they say, oh, I need to have 1 space per 3 bedrooms. We say, no, you don't. You don't have to have 1 space per 3 bedrooms. But the table says that. I'm in the Transect code. So I think that's actually an easy cleanup item that we should do. Like, it should be mostly striking it or referencing the other parking section. The other thing that really bothered me when we had the item about the structured parking is the fact that, like, it sort of came to my attention that there aren't parking design standards outside of non-Transect zones, and I think we need to work on that. So that, I realize that's not here, but like, that is like high priority to me, that we get some parking design standards. And I would say even above some of this stuff, like, if I have to invest staff time on DT and U10 changing the name or getting some parking design standards in non-Transect zones, that's gonna win. So, and we talked about it that night, I think but it's not on this list anywhere, it's sort of a new thing, but it's a like glaring problem in the code, that was brought to our attention.
There's an actual case. That we
Yes,
have that we can reference.
so that I would like to see worked in somewhere, looking at parking design standards, cleaning up the parking requirements in Transect zones to make it consistent. And then I think just, maybe combining the June and July lists so that we can talk about, combining those categories, to belong together. And I think because that is all, and I have the code up here, because that is all in the same table, all of the, mixed use and non-residential, I think sending that as like one package and sending Transects as another package is an easy way to pass it to the city commission, so they're really only looking at one part of the code at a time. And it's like a complete table, it's kind of a combination of the two strategies. So that would be my recommendation on those things.
I agree with that. I think I would go so far as to say I think an omnibus actually kind of goes against the spirit of what we were trying to do here, which is to try to go in a digestible fashion. The city commission has shown time and again, not just this commission, but previous commissions, omnibus is a lot to digest, and I think that, you know, we're kind of doing the work of getting into the weeds for them, and so I think the more we can present something that's easy to digest for them, the better it is.
Are you all able to add a little bit more information for the priorities, like Member Sutton has talked about for, you know, is it that design standards for parking garages should be moved up anywhere or added here to months, or do you all as members have feedback for which things get different priority here?
So I would just suggest the name change thing to me was a low hanging fruit thing. I didn't think it needed months of research because it literally, like, we're not actually changing the category, we're just changing the name. And we're changing the name to fit a convention that is being used across the board. So if it ends up being a thing that needs a lot more staff resource, then I think that's, again, a much lower priority. I agree with Member Sutton that that's not the highest priority thing. It was there to kind of get an easy change. If that's not the case, then I think we should bump that down. Same thing with Transect zoning by height, by feet instead of stories and feet for clarity. If that's the thing that's going to require a lot of research and a lot more discussion and backup, I think we can bump up some other things ahead of that in the priority list. I had that on there because I thought, perhaps naively, that would be more of a quick and easy change rather than something that requires a lot of staff time. If these things, so keep us honest too, Forrest, if these things do take, if some of the things that I think or some other folks think are easy, if they're not easy, let us know. And then we'll adjust our priorities as needed.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, some of these things I won't even know now as director and being removed a lot from the day-to-day planning until getting this feedback that you've been shown here from month to month. Getting that initial feedback from each of these categories from our planning staff is going to be absolutely critical, even for myself personally. So I think that those will help both, you know, staff and you all start to identify some of these priorities.
I'm leaving Bob hanging.
Actually, I blurted out what I wanted to say.
Oh, okay. Dr. Murmur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. First, a question: where did we land, like as a board, about whether we were going to send an omnibus or send item by item?
I think we're going item. I mean, we haven't voted on it, but I think we're all. The people that have spoken up about it, I shouldn't put words in other people's mouth, haven't.
That's what I thought, and I agreed. But then somebody
yeah.
mentioned like a compromise or a mix of the two, and then that just.
No, I think it's still like Ms. Sutton mentioned. Let's send the Transects. Let's send let's group all the business ones together. I think they're separated out here on the schedule, but let's group those together and send them all as one. Like that, I think is sort of how maybe that's the compromise. I'm not sure, but
Well, with the Transect stuff, the permitted uses in the Transects, if we send all of our suggestions for those changes at once, that is going to be a big omnibus thing, and that would, I agree with Bob, that could blow up the entire thing.
we could go I mean, I don't want to go necessarily like send you one, we send you two, like parse it out that way because
Well,
then some
there's
of
some you
it
can
is-
collapse like easily.
Yeah.
Right? Or at least in our, what we've seen on the ground, we can see how they are connected. It's like my 4 priorities: daycare centers, retail sales. Right? That's neighborhood livability. Like those
Right.
things are linked. Laboratory research sites, light assembly manufacturing. That's economic development jobs linked. Like,
So I guess the question for you, Dr. Murmur, putting you on the spot, do you think it'd be easier if we sent like basically U1 to U3 or U4, which are sort of the lower intensity Transect zones, and we go, these are the changes we'd like to make to this group, and that's sent at one time, and then we go, okay, now here's U5 to say U8 or whatever, and taking them arbitrarily right now. This is what we want to change in that, and we send it out, and we kind of chunk it out into 2 or 3 different chunks. Do you think that that would be
Like 2 to 3 different chunks of transect zones,
just
but then
transect
all the
zones, yeah.
permitted uses
within those
each-
transect
within
zones?
those, I still think that the permitted uses are gonna be more controversial than the transect zones. So that's why I think we should, try to bundle the permitted uses that we see can be logically bundled and then send those one at a time.
That's something.
Okay, so I'm gonna like really rock the boat here because we've had this debate and we ended up kind of down this path where we're looking at zoning districts. But it's sounding like the better, quicker approach is gonna be going use by use with the uses that we care a lot about. And so, Dr. Murmur has some uses that are important to him. I agree with those. I think I've expressed certain uses I'd like to see become a special use permit again, like they used to be. It sounds like what I'm hearing from staff is that if we focus on a use across all the zoning districts, it might be easier for you to pull back up together, use by use,
We can do
across the
either.
zoning districts. It sounds like that may go
Smoother.
smoother. And we asked this question and we kind of have, hobbled around and thought, looking at the whole table is gonna be better, but now that we're here, I think picking our priority uses and going across the board is probably better. So like, we want, light assembly, fabrication and processing. We want research, let's look at those 2 together and look across the board. Let's look at car washes, drive-throughs, and gas stations, and across the board, make them special use permits.
I think absolutely staff can do that and can do it from that approach. Caveat, of course, that we partially did that with the bars,
Yeah,
and we have seen that that is part of the process, and that's perfectly fine too. It just does still continue to take the resource and time.
Right.
my concern is that if we send them this whole marked up table, and there's one change to a hot button issue in here, it holds all of it up.
Yeah.
So
If
I am changing, I would like to suggest changing our path to a use by use path rather than a zoning district by zoning district path. Because I think we're gonna be more successful. And even if we have a couple of them get hung up, I think we can get a lot of them done that way. And the high priority items, who knows? Could be controversial.
Right.
But some of our high priorities, I think they'll be pretty easy to pull together and move through. Now, the problem is then we miss these little categories where we just want to make something permitted in a couple more zoning districts, and maybe we come back to this, but I'm afraid we lose all of this anyway if there's one category in here that they're going to hold us up on. So I don't know. I realize that would be a big change for our approach, both for the board and for staff, but sitting here and talking about this, I think that might be more successful. So, maybe if we agree on that, and if staff's okay with that, maybe we can try to prioritize some of those in this schedule format instead. I think you've heard a couple. I mean, I think the economic development piece is really important.
Yeah.
The city commission was supposed to talk about that today and didn't, but I think that's a good thing to prioritize in that vein. So, that, and I think the auto-oriented uses we've talked about a handful of times, seeing those go back to special use permits. We can talk about some of the others that may be high priority. I'm trying to see on here, significant changes. Yeah, the drive-throughs, gas
Could be auto-
stations,
auto-oriented.
and car washes all together.
It does seem like we could just group it, we have commercial stuff, right, manufacturing, there's even exercise studios listed here by Member Nay as something that should be permitted across the board. So there's things that are business focused, and then there's the auto focused stuff that I think we all want to walk back, right? Member Sutton, am I hearing you correct in that you're saying we should just take a few uses, not just across transects, but across, like,
Across all of them. So this came up when we were talking about MU1 and MU2. I was saying, you know, I forget if it was drive-throughs or car washes or something. I said, let's make it special use permits.
Yeah.
When you do it in one zoning district, we might as well do it across the board all at once, right?
Mhm.
So it almost, and we talked about doing that. I remember having this conversation with Juan, maybe even 2 or 3 times, like what staff would prefer.
Right.
And we ended up down this path, and I think we might need to go the other way.
I wonder if there's a sort of a hybrid of the two, because like MU1 and MU2 is to me much more easily digestible, just because it's 2 and it's a straight comparison. The transect zones, this table's a lot. It just looks like a lot when you first get it. It looks like a lot, and I wonder if sort of building off of what Dr. Murmer suggested and what you suggested, that we pick our top 6 or whatever number we want to agree on. That's like, these are the 6 most important things that we want to get changed within the transects in terms of allowed uses, and then just send that within the transects, and just the other stuff that we don't agree on, we just don't send.
I think we can hit like research and development and light manufacturing
Like across,
in
yeah.
the commercial and industrial districts at the same time as the transects, and send that use
Okay.
to the commission
I'd be
together.
okay with that too.
Like, and then, I think we can hit both of these tables with our high priority use changes
Mhm.
at the same time.
Okay.
And then
I
we
can get
don't
on that.
send them a big table that has 100 lines of uses.
Right.
Because even on the transect table, half of these aren't changing at all, maybe, I don't know. So it is a little overwhelming, it's 4 pages long. Like, let's make it 3 lines long. Like, here's our 3 uses.
Right. And here's where
Here's
we're
our
changing
3 uses. This is our proposed changes to those rows. So we're thinking of rows rather than columns.
them. Okay.
Our current schedule takes a zoning district-based approach
Yeah.
instead of a use-based approach. This whole schedule would
It
need to
changes
be
everything, yeah.
whole rejiggered. So
We've been working on, we've been trying to work this thing for over a year, and it's not going very far.
yeah,
And it would prioritize, I think, the uses that are
important.
most,
that-
yeah,
that
like
are
kind of
immediately
have the
needed
most
to
need.
address.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Like ask one, like, when was the last time somebody called up their office to complain they couldn't manufacture ice?
Mhm.
Yeah. Some of them are way too, like, they're too particular.
Does anyone have high priority items, like, or uses aside from some of the R&D and like light manufacturing and then changing the auto-oriented use? Do any of these other ones really jump out as like, we need to put them in this table?
I think there's things like, so it's funny, is that exercise studio is one of those things that's it's a business that's easy to get off the ground, but if we limit where we can get it off, I should say it's relatively easy to get off the ground compared to other businesses, while also, I think, having a lower impact around surrounding neighborhoods compared to some of the other stuff that's on here. And so it's one of those, doesn't seem like much, but actually I think could drive actual like commercial traffic, commercial business. And the manufacturing, the research, I agree with Dr. Murmer. We need a lot more of that in town. We need, I've been thinking about this a lot actually, because I've been talking to people about it. We talk a lot about affordable housing, but we need the other end of it too, right? We need good paying jobs so that more housing just becomes affordable for people. And I think the city has done a fairly decent job at focusing on the housing part of it, especially compared to years past. But the jobs part is really what I'd love to see us. I guess that would be my priority when we're looking at this. Is like, where can we drive more jobs in Gainesville? Where can we drive not just more jobs, but better keeping jobs and better paying jobs too? Where is it that we can drive it, and how can we use the code to incentivize that more in town? So manufacturing, I'm aligned with Dr. Murmer on the manufacturing being a priority. Manufacturing, researching, development. you know, I think something like mini warehouse self-storage can be a much lower priority. It's just me, but I don't know that that's quite a driver of things. I think office being allowed in more places, great. I think we should allow more, even medical, dental, like allowing that more in more areas, great. Those are, again, generally jobs that pay better. We need more of that.
And those data-wise, to some extent, we can bring in that data that shows we've had requests for office and have had it be limited or restricted.
Yeah, so maybe that's our like economic development, bring jobs package, those uses, and they can get analyzed together across the two tables as like one group, and then the other can be the auto-oriented uses across both tables.
I have a quick
Because
question.
realistically, I mean, we're already, you know, at the end of April here, right? So, and if we're gonna really work on comp plan stuff, it takes a lot of time for those of you who haven't been through a comp plan before. I mean, I think that if we can accomplish those two packages and maybe look at parking design standards this year, I mean, that would be a huge,
That'd be huge.
that would be huge. And the rest of this, like, you know, maybe we come back to and avoid the omnibus package.
I mean, I also think it's like less like coming back to it. I think it's an ongoing conversation. I think as long as we have a board, we should be consistently, proactively looking at places to better the code. I'd love for that work to be done one day, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. Because just how our city is will change over time, and we'll find ways where we can adapt. The code should be adaptable. But in the short term, I very much agree with this approach, actually, of like, let's prioritize, you know, auto uses, restricting those, and allowing more business-focused development.
Well, and we ought to incorporate the fact that this will increase walkability.
Yeah, I agree.
And walkability, I think, is thanks, Mom.
Just want to make sure you're heard.
You're a good vice chair.
Because I think adding light manufacturing, all that stuff in town allows a lot of people to no longer drive somewhere. I've had the distinct pleasure over the last 25 years to spend a couple of weeks a year in Salt Lake City, which does a whole lot of that. And some of the things I really like about that is they have little limited commercial districts in almost every single neighborhood. And they're mostly single-family neighborhoods. And they'll have a dry cleaner, they'll have a restaurant, they will have a repair place, stuff like that. But if you go there, you'll find almost no parking. Everybody walks from the neighborhood.
Yeah. It can be done.
Can I ask a first quick question? So you mentioned looking at, when doing the analysis, looking at requests for these more permitted uses for economic development, and you mentioned, and I think that was the only type of data you mentioned. Would it be possible to request that you also, or that staff also looks at warn notices and other indicators of job loss, just to help give some context to what's happening here and why?
We are able to pull up some of that data. What was the phrase that you just had?
Warn Act, the Warn Act data?
I'm not sure that our department actually pulls that, but anytime we can pull data to try to make some of these decisions.
Yeah.
What we need to be doing.
Yeah, so Warn Act doesn't cover everything because sometimes employers will lay off, 49 people at a time instead of 50 or more, but you will see, if you look at the data, some tough losses.
For what I was speaking to and what we can generally get data on is the requests that come into our department for, can I open this type of business?
Yeah.
And why or why not? And that we can typically, to some extent, we can pull that up.
Mr. Nay.
I was just looking at the schedule. Are we also, totally off topic, are we not going to discuss historical buffer zones? I didn't see that anywhere. Was that something that was kicked down the road? Because that, honestly,
There's a
that
lot
would
of
be,
things that aren't on this list.
Yeah.
that would be more of my priority than even design standards for structured parking, if I'm going to be
For
straight.
not structured parking.
For non-structured parking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not structured parking, like, so you can't have a big field of parking in front of your,
Right.
you know, apartment building with 300 units, you can't just have 600 spaces
Like the
in one
u-
big
Well, don't we have
field.
parking maximums right now? Is that after a certain amount of parking, they have to build a structured parking?
Yes, but that was, you know, brought to our attention that if they were 199 spaces, there would be no standard until they got to 200. They wouldn't have, they could all be in the front, they wouldn't have to be distributed, they, you know.
Gotcha.
That's a real
I
problem.
understand
Yeah,
that.
that's it's a
That's
real problem.
If you go down to like North Tampa, they will actually build like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, one big apartment building with 300 units and 200
If you
parking
let
spaces
people
in
build
front
the
of
cheap
it.
and easy way, then.
So our code right now would allow that.
Yeah.
And non-transect zones.
North Tampa
Gotcha.
urban standard is what our non-transit zones are really written very similar to, and it gets you that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly why we did.
Yeah, that's why we
adopt
had
the
the structured
transects
parking
in
thing.
Yeah.
2017. Yeah.
Transect zones do have standards, so you're only
Yeah.
allowed a
Right.
certain percent. You can have like one row, in some transects, you can have a double loaded row in front of the building, but that's it. And like more than half has to be to the side and rear,
And that
whatever you
is-
provide. So there are
what I was
standards,
trying to
there's
describe last
design
time.
standards. And we have a great example in transects. We might need to make it a little more flexible for the other districts, but like, we need something.
I think part of the goal, at least at the time in 2017, was hopefully to continue to work towards adopting transect zones more broadly.
So to add to that, the zoning districts that don't have those parking lot standards are just RMF 5, or it's the RMF districts. The thing that you had mentioned about you can have 50% and some to the side and stuff like that, that is under the non-residential and commercial uses, not in transect zones. So anyway, there's different specifics for different areas. The big area where it's really not regulated at all is the multifamily districts, RMF.
Garden style apartments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A note about the historic buffer zone. This is one of the issues where I actually would like the commission, I'd like to get some sense of the commission that there's an actual appetite to take this up, because this is one of the things that we could spend a lot of time on. And I agree, I'd love to actually look at it. I think it needs looking at. But it does seem like something that we could use a lot of staff resources, and it gets to the commission and it's dead on arrival. And so I would like a little more insight from the commission. If they even wanted to direct us on it, that would be wonderful. I don't know that they're going to do that, but I'd like to get some sense that that's a priority for them, and that if we bring it to them, it will get actual consideration with a, better than 10% odds of passing.
The way, the only way really formally that staff would do that is similar to the alcohol beverage establishment, is that we would do some preliminary assessment of the situation. We would provide the direction that you all have pointed us towards, and we would put it in front of the commission to see what is the direction. Do you have an appetite for this?
If I understood what the chair said, though, was like, I don't think he wants staff to even do that before we know that they're.
Oh, no, I mean, I think
okay,
that's how
the
we'll
preliminary
find
stuff.
out.
Okay.
I think it's one of those things, I don't want the board to take that up without some indication that the commission has the appetite to take this on. Because
Yeah.
I think we'll spend a lot of time, it'll require some coordination with the historic preservation officer, and we'll certainly have a lot of people, I think, very interested in that. Historic preservation, historic districts tend to inspire a lot, of passion among
We're
people.
talking about all historic districts. Yeah, why don't we just talk about the one that they constantly tell me about, which is on the north side of University Avenue?
Yeah,
We
between
can do
6th
that.
and 13th. I
Yeah.
wasn't going
We can
anywhere
do that.
near
Okay.
the duck pond.
Okay. We
No
can
way
do
near.
that.
I mean,
But 6th and 13th, that's going to still make a lot of people upset.
maybe the way to approach the one target area that I think we have is through like a specific text amendment addressing, if the land, is on a, whatever it's considered, a collector or arterial road or whatever, there's
Right.
like more flexibility given, like, write I think that's the way to approach it rather than opening up, like, let's come up with some code that will apply, like, literally to the one place that we're worried about. Because, and some of so this is going way, way back. I think only Bob is going to be with me here, but some of the special area plans had this kind of flexibility around the historic districts. And that's an area where we got rid of a special area plan and we went to a transect. And, we've had this issue in, with the, what did they call it? The blade building, the edge building, whatever,
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
thing. Like, we had a special area plan that addressed this. And like, we sort of had some context-specific standards that were a little bit different with height against some historic districts than others. And so I think that there's like a text amendment way to do that that's specific to the location on a FDOT roadway
Some of the
that
districts
avoids
have
the issues
specific
that we're going to have. Like, we're not changing this,
All over the city.
all over the
Right.
city.
Yeah, we're just doing one part. That strikes me as a better way to do it.
Yeah, so
We can make announcements.
maybe staff can put a
would
little
make
bit
announcements
of
easier.
thought into that approach, because I don't want to open it up citywide. I think we're concerned about literally a handful of parcels. There might be 5 or 6, right?
Yeah.
We are concerned about 5 or 6 parcels. I don't think we need to open up the conversation citywide. We'll end up down a huge rabbit hole and it'll take 10 meetings.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about, it kind of goes back to what I think is helpful for everything that you talk about, is like narrowing it down to like, where is the issue coming from? Let's focus it in rather than making it a larger conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah. Why don't we bring it back to this? Because I think we're kind of going off in a lot of
Sorry.
places. No, it's fine. I mean, it's a business discussion item we're going to discuss. What if we just kind of go through this as a board collectively? I think to give staff as much specific guidance as possible, we can go through and say, this category is a priority, this is a priority. I mean, I'm happy to read out all the non-residential ones, but obviously we already worked on alcoholic beverage establishments, so we're gonna skip that. Assisted living facility, I don't think that was a huge priority that's come up. I don't know if anybody wants to advocate for that, but I'd be okay sort of saving that for later. No changes to bed and breakfast, so that's not an issue. Business services, I think could be lumped in. I mean, there's only one change, which is U5, allowing business
That
services.
was one
in
of the
U5.
things they pushed back the hardest on.
Was business services.
Oh,
huh?
yeah. Bob, you remember those meetings. Yep.
I'm having a flashback.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are
This is like the stuff of Mark Goldstein's nightmares right here, this little P
The
that you
P.
drew in.
so among the board? What's do we have an appetite for wanting to push the change in U5 on business services, or is that something we want to hit up later?
I don't think it's high priority.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree, it's not very high priority, but it's only because it's such a small area, so
Okay.
it's a lot of effort.
We've already indicated that moving car washes to special use permits is a priority. I think enough
But
people.
just in the 2 zones that it's already allowed?
No, across the board. The two that
I thought you would just not add them to anywhere, right? Because they're not allowed in some.
yeah, but
zones.
we would, well, depending on how we go here, we would approach that across the other table as well.
Gotcha.
Okay. So car wash is one that we've indicated is a priority. I don't think anybody has, well, no, there's no changes to fraternal organizations. Daycare center, I think has been identified as a priority.
But just for me.
And I'm with you on that
Yeah, I'm
too.
with you too.
That's 3 of us. I think that is a priority. Drive-through facilities, again, we've mentioned this is a priority of making this more of a special use permit across the board. Emergency shelter, I don't know that anybody's talked about it.
Could be a hot button issue.
I think we can save that one for later, yeah. No changes to equipment rental and leasing. I think I might be the only person advocating for an exercise studio
I'm
across the board. But
there.
you're there? Okay. I do think it's an economic development thing, and there's a business case to be made for it.
You can't open a yoga studio in some of these places.
Right. I mean, it's a very low intensity use, and I think it's a little silly that we don't allow
Maybe the way
that.
you work out.
Andrew's trying to kill me every day.
Yeah.
I saw it the
You
other
saw
day.
it. You saw it.
It's intense.
See, what happens is then people are forced to work out in the Thomas Center. It's really unsightly. I mean, those are beautiful gardens. I don't know that I want to see a bunch of people.
Especially the way I work.
Yeah.
Accessory use.
Yeah, right.
It's a bunch of shirtless city staff members out there. It's just, farmers market hasn't been mentioned
Oh wait,
as
is
a
exercise
priority.
studio a high priority?
Yeah, I think that's a priority.
What's
Okay.
that? What's that face?
I was just looking at others. That's 2 out of.
Does anybody else have?
Those are two for. It's two for
I'm
sort
not a
of.
fan of exercise, so.
He's a smoker.
Studios he's into that.
Farmers market, I haven't heard anybody bring up, but you can speak now if you want to advocate for it. I think the farmers market thing is a little silly that it's restricted as much as it is. But
will they try to open up any more than they have right now?
I think we're kind of at farmers market capacity for the moment.
I mean, already one closed last year because there was like 4 going on.
Yeah, so I don't think it's a huge priority, and nor do I think we can make a actual like concrete use case for expanding it at the moment. Food distribution center for the needy. I think we can come back to this one so that we can pass some of the lower hanging fruit first. No changes to the food trucks except for 6 or more pads, in which case that goes from special use permits across the board to by right through a lot of that.
I think we can skip that for now.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
think.
The one food truck park we have is not
It's not
been super
yeah,
successful.
not really.
So I don't know that people are
Well,
lining
there's
up
the
to
one
do
that-
new ones.
Yeah.
That's over across the street in the Burger King parking lot, right? That's gonna.
Well, but that's only
That's
that's
not
not
a-
that's not
That's not
six,
a food truck
that's
park.
not 6
It's
pounds.
not a
so.
food truck park. We didn't
Yeah.
permit that as a food truck park.
Oh, it's just.
It's just food trucks parking there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Funeral home, not a priority. I think we are actually pretty well served with funeral homes. So,
Maybe not for you.
well, certain people are very well. I hope not to be well served for funeral home for a very long time. Gasoline alternative fuel stations, moving that to a special use permit across the board, I believe is a priority that's been stated many times by this board. We've X'd out go-kart rental because that's just indoor recreation.
Sorry, Josh.
The issue that brought this whole conversation up.
Isn't that really funny? That should, yeah.
I can't believe it. Just no more go-karts with you guys.
No more specifically broken out category go-karts. Health services, could take it or leave it. I don't know if we need to address that now, or it could be a sort of secondary conversation.
Secondary, I think.
Okay.
Just to go back to the gasoline one, if the focus of these amendments is like economic development, should the gasoline be looped into that, being that it's just a restrictive thing to promote a better, more walkable city? Is that economic development? Or am I taking too
I
strict
think
of
the
a lens?
auto-oriented uses need to be grouped because the analysis is more similar for why we want those to be. I mean, we're kind of going the opposite direction with our
On those?
on those,
Yeah,
you
we
know,
are
so
kinda-
justifying why we want more specific design standards and things as opposed to the other uses, we just want to allow more places.
Yeah, I think
These,
it's
we want to make it a little bit tougher.
Yeah, I think it's a priority, but it's not neatly in the group of the others where we're opening up economic development opportunities versus trying to make a more livable community by increasing the frequency of automobile-oriented uses, so.
It might be a thing we bring,
And-
we might want to bring the things we want to push to allow more spots first,
Mhm.
and then
I
come
think
in with
makes
the special use
more sense.
restrictions at a later time to the commission.
Because I hadn't thought about it before, but other than the Wawas, I'm seeing many more gas stations go out.
We've seen a few, I mean, the
Yeah,
gate
I
is
haven't
fairly
done
new, the Circle
Yeah.
K up at
The Circle
Sixth
K up
and
at Sixth Street.
441.
Yeah.
The one up by Home Depot just redeveloped. I mean, it's happening.
That wasn't a gas
The
station.
one, the Chevron out by I-75, That one actually looks really nice. James designed that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the building's really nice.
It's a
Yeah,
cool
it's happening.
Yeah, so I haven't thought about it before, I'm just like. trying
It's
to-
happening.
But to Member Hill's point, I do think maybe we just bring that at a later date. I'm happy to call them out because I think we should group them all together, but let's push for allowing more stuff and then we'll come back with sort of a stronger case for why we think this should be a special use permit. Okay, hotel or motel, again, I don't think this is a huge priority at the moment. Laboratory, medical, or dental. Any strong feelings on that?
So can I ask staff a question? And this is going to give Bob another flashback. What would you, if someone was coming in and they wanted to put a new plasma center, what would that be considered? Is that a laboratory, what's the one we were just looking at, laboratory, medical, or dental? Or is it a...
Health service?
Because we had a lot of fears about plasma centers. What would that be exactly?
Currently, we classify that as laboratory.
Okay,
medical,
so
or
I think
dental
you're gonna get
activity.
pushback on
So let's go ahead and,
U5.
yeah, let's just go ahead and come back to that at a later time. I don't think, again, nobody on the board mentioned it as a priority. We've talked about this for a while today, so I think that's fine. Libraries. We're allowing it in single-family
Yeah.
neighborhoods. I think it kind of makes sense to just allow it across the board. I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot of pushback about allowing libraries in Transect zones.
My markup on that line, if I can jump in,
Yeah.
was to have it, so what we were putting in single family was have it as a special use permit. I would do that in U1 through 3 and then allowed beyond that. And I don't know
I
if
think that's
staff
fine.
can
I mean, it's a practical matter, how many
Yeah.
libraries is the district?
I
gonna
know.
The district doesn't have, they're not planning on building anything new
That's
for a
what I'm
while,
saying,
so-
I'm not
Yeah.
sure this is that important.
Yeah, we can come back to that too. Light assembly, fabrication, and processing. This has been noted as a priority, and I think we should absolutely push this one. Push to get that expanded. Medical marijuana, don't want to touch that. Microbrewery, again, I think it's the same as sort of alcoholic beverage establishment. I'm in favor of it, but I think we should come back to that at a different time. A mini warehouse, self-storage facility. I don't know that there's a whole lot of need for more self-storage facilities. We do seem to have a lot.
There's a
of
lot
them.
of appetite for it.
Is there?
I don't know what the analysis of the need is, but we get a lot of inquiries on people wanting to open new ones.
Really?
They make a lot of money.
They do make a lot of
There's
money.
no,
It's a placeholder.
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
nothing to
I
do.
think there's a lot to
Yeah.
unpack with that
People
use.
have a lot
I
of
kind of
stuff.
hate them.
The city should develop a pamphlet about how to throw things away or give them away.
Well, there's
Yeah, I don't think
a lot of the
that- yeah.
students need a place to store their stuff for.
For the summer.
That's true.
100%.
Yeah.
You're right.
But
Generally, they are
Once stuff gets in
placeholders
there,
for property owners in urbanized areas, and then the buildings that they build are also extremely recyclable for whatever that's worth. So it is really intentional that it will be there for maybe 5 to 15 years, recycle the whole building, and then do something different in an urbanized area, which is why they're popping up really everywhere in urbanized areas. If you go to other cities, you'll see them immediately. Multiple story storage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that new one up in
Such
North
eyesores.
North 441 near the Social Security office.
from my perspective in transect zones, it's not an active use, so I'm not a
Yeah.
fan. That's just
Yeah.
well, it's also not a use you want to have in a walkable neighborhood.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I agree.
I don't think they're built in expensive neighborhoods in Gainesville. I don't think it would be built.
What about special use permit, doesn't have to get pretty bad, it's like if it is near like a student, like kind of ways to a popular area, that's fair.
Yeah.
Or design
I think
criteria
we'll defer
for
on
that
it for now.
specific
Yeah.
use. And two, at least from what we've seen so far, to their credit, generally these places, even in districts that don't require a lot of design standards, they actually provide design standards more than what our code provides, generally.
That's great. We'll deal with it at a later time.
Yeah.
On that note, museum or art gallery. a great one that I support that I think maybe we can come back to unless, I mean, make the case for it, you know, but I want to kind of whittle this down to a digestible sort of package.
I want art galleries everywhere.
I mean, you know, honestly, an art gallery is, to me, is such a low intensity use, and it is a little
So
absurd that we
100% is
don't.
low.
Yeah, it is a little absurd. I mean, it could be in somebody's house, you know.
100%.
In fact, a lot of museums were just old rich people's houses.
But there's some DIY, you know, art galleries here in Gainesville that are in weird spots right now.
Make the case for it, and I'm happy to support it if you
Nobody
want.
else supports it, it's fine.
Nobody else
I don't
supports
think
it?
it ties into our
Okay.
messaging right now.
Okay, we'll come back to art galleries. Office, yes, I think that ties, I mean, the name ties right into it. Office is a priority. Office, medical, dental, or other health-related service, I think should also be a priority.
And real quick, on that note, it's not, can the argument be made that plasma center could be considered under this use, or is it strictly the laboratory?
Check the definitions real quick. But in recent, we've approved some recently, and through the conversation, we've specifically said it's laboratory.
Is there a
You
blood
don't
threshold?
gain a lot of area with the laboratory adding it to U5. I mean, we looked at how narrow that is, so you really don't gain that much by adding laboratory in U5.
Right.
So actually, it's in the definition of laboratories, medical and dental. It includes blood banks, plasma centers, whatever. So we wouldn't put it under office, medical, or dental.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in that case, I think we can push to expand office, medical, or dental then. I don't think we'll quite have an opposition to that. Parking, we hate it, so we're not gonna. I joke, there's a place for parking, of course. Passenger transit station, oh, how I wish that was a real thing in Gainesville. That is not. Personal services, what is considered a personal service?
We see it a lot as tattoo places.
Massage,
Massage.
nail places.
Yeah. I'll pull up the definition for you real quick, but it's a service, blah, blah, blah. Engaged in providing services involving the care of a person, his or her apparel, pets, or small appliances, including barbershops, beauty shops, exercise studios.
Why do we have it broken out? It should be folded into
Funeral
personal.
homes.
Oh, that's
Pet
interesting.
grooming, appliance repair service, laundromats, health and fitness clubs, parcel delivery offices.
Okay. I do think that category merits, we need to look at that because that's including stuff that's already separately broken out and is contradictory to personal services. But for the purposes of expediting this, I think that's something we have to look at a later time. We're not touching place of religious assembly because it's not changed here.
Maybe struck by lightning.
You know? It's also basically allowed everywhere. Professional school, I think we can leave that be for now. Public administration building, again, I think we can probably leave that be for now. Public parks stay the same. Indoor recreation, Josh May, make a case.
It's hot in Florida, I hope to play sports all the time, everywhere, but.
I mean, I kind of think it's, what is the threshold for indoor recreation? I mean, it's like golf, and go-karts are part of it, is it
I
bowling
can give you some
alleys?
examples. So escape rooms have recently been classified that way.
Okay.
The axe throwing bar.
Right, okay.
The go-karts would be considered that.
Would like a shooting range, where would that fall under? If one thing were, such
That
a
might be
thing were to
its own
pop up.
category. I'd have to look.
It
That's
probably
opening
should
up-
get its own category if it ever comes up.
Yeah, I don't know. It hasn't come
Like
up
an
recently.
indoor pickleball facility or racquetball?
Yeah, that would all be indoor rec.
You're gonna bring up pickleball at this hour.
Like board game place or like the arcades and
Right.
stuff like that.
Let's come back to that one, I think. I mean, I'm in favor of it, but I also like whatever.
We're talking about economic development, man.
I guess that's true. I mean,
I-
recreation is a big deal. Let's push it.
And it's stuff that's pretty low intensity for the most part, and people open businesses and have jobs and they're fun.
And they're indoors.
And they're indoors, so they're not really affecting. All right, let's push it. Add indoor recreation to the list. Outdoor recreation. We're in the R's. I'm just trying to go through all these things so that they have a list that's they can see.
Outdoor recreation, you're potentially dealing with like field lights and stuff. They tend to be a little controversial,
Yeah.
but it
Also-
seems weird not to have outdoor if you're also doing indoor.
They also tend to be public parks.
Yeah, I don't know where
Yeah.
they do that in these zones,
Do we-
because there's not, you'd have to have facilities to do that, you need space.
Yeah, it doesn't really.
Can we just drop that one?
I think let's drop it for now. Research, development, testing, yes, we want that expanded. Dr. Murmur, can you remind us where you wanted that expanded? I think you'd wanted it in U4, U5, and U6 as well. Is that correct?
4, 5, and 6, yeah.
Okay. So we'd like to expand it to 4, 5, and 6. Residence for destitute people, we're not going to touch at the moment. Restaurants. I'm in favor of this. I think that we should have more restaurants. I think, again, it's a, if we're talking about economic development, that's
And walkability.
and walkability, then allowing restaurants in more places makes a lot of sense. It is something that is extraordinarily hard to start and very capital intensive to start and has a very low success rate. And part of it is, in Gainesville, we say you can only have restaurants in these, handful of areas, and you might find the perfect spot, and you can't do it. And this category is what inspired me to bring this up, because of the donut place that's a food truck that really should be a.
It should have been by right.
It should have been by right, and
they didn't need to come to
they
us.
spent thousands of dollars to open up a food truck
Donut shop?
to sell donuts.
The Baloo's that opened on 23rd.
Right.
Oh, well, I thought that was an ice cream shop or gelato.
It was BZ Gelatis, but they.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. In any case, restaurant is one of these businesses that cannot afford to go through a special use permitting process or rezoning process. There's no way that you can come out of that and expect to reasonably succeed. So I think we should definitely make restaurants a priority. Retail sales.
Oh, actually, quick question about restaurants.
Yeah.
And same thing with retail sales.
Mhm.
Where does alcohol come into play in here? If there's a restaurant that wants to serve alcohol, are they an alcoholic?
No, this is the restaurant.
Just a restaurant?
There's a threshold for amount of money made.
Yeah.
It's percentage of food sales versus
Yeah.
alcohol.
It's 50% or more.
50% or more for alcohol sales to be considered alcoholic.
Yeah,
sales.
Yeah.
if your food sales exceed your alcohol sales, then you're in a whole different category.
Oh. I was wondering, because I know I've had conversations with some commissioners, and they brought up concerns about drinking at restaurants.
I mean, there's also,
They're for it or against it?
Just that some bad actors would use it as a loophole to
they would still have to get a license though too. If you're going to serve liquor, you're going to have to get a liquor license. And so there are other points in the process to, if somebody's going to be a bad actor about it.
Yeah.
If there are real concerns about
That's an
location.
enforcement issue.
Yeah.
I'm on board. Just wanted to bring it up.
Yes.
I don't know if this is sort of, out of the ordinary. I think somebody in the audience wants to ask a question. Is that okay?
Is that allowed?
I mean, we're just talking. So sure, yeah, if you'd like to. I mean, you're here.
We didn't intend to stay this long, but we've had questions, and we're like, are we supposed to remember all these questions till the
It's
bitter end? Like,
just-
that's a lot.
No, I mean,
Come
sure,
up and
yeah, come
introduce
up.
yourself and
Yeah.
ask your question.
Totally.
Where are you on the agenda right now?
we're
Just
at the,
in general,
we're,
but
we're at this.
so
the
we
business
just
discussion.
about restaurants. So we talked about like things with drive-throughs earlier, and that was a different category.
It is, yeah.
So when we talk about drive-throughs, we're not talking about restaurants. That's a whole.
So it would be the
Okay.
difference between like a Burger King or an Applebee's. to put it in the worst terms possible, I guess.
Where's Chipotle fall in there, y'all?
Restaurant.
If it has a drive-through, it has to have it's a special category. If a Chipotle doesn't have the drive-through, it just falls under restaurant.
Okay. All right, no, that was just, we were just wondering right there was, you know,
Yeah,
those
and this is-
drive-throughs are
this is
so have
really-
such a high potential to back up traffic and.
Right,
You
and
know.
right now, we are just
Okay.
sticking to Transect and commercial zones, so we're not talking about,
And-
residential, single family, any of that.
Well, and previously we discussed, like, this has been a priority for the board for as long as I've been on it, which actually isn't that long, but requiring special use permits for all drive-throughs, which would
Okay, that's what I
create
thought.
some safeguards for the health, safety, welfare of the surrounding area. Yeah.
Yep,
We've all driven by Starbucks at the wrong time of day, so we get you.
it's rough. Yeah, we do want to address that. We're discussing now that I think we want to address that at a later date, just to try to get into things that we want to allow more of, and then add restrictions later on drive-throughs and other sort of auto-centric uses. Thank you.
We're on retail sales.
So retail sales, Dr. Murmur, did you, I
If-
think you were starting a thought on that, and then.
Oh, no, I was just a question. You're the one that bought
Oh, right,
the
the-
license, so that
Right.
assuaged my
Say it
concern.
again?
You brought up the fact that they would have to help to get a license.
The liquor
You
license
reminded
and
me
all that.
of that, so that
Okay.
assuaged my concerns.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and I like it, walkability.
So retail sales, I think, also was mentioned as a priority, and so we should be encouraging that across the board.
To some extent, the issue you're gonna have with retail sales is whether it's a big box or not.
Right.
I mean, that you may want to restrict the size in some of those.
100%. Yeah. City staff, how would we go about this?
In,
Yeah.
yeah, there are some things to unpack with that particular use. I don't think it specifies in the Transect zones, but in the other table that board member Sutton was talking about, the non-residential, and there is a definition in the code of large-scale retail. It's
Yeah.
more it was more used in older versions of the code.
I mean, special use permit would be appropriate, I mean, just, we're just talking about neighborhood stores.
I would say currently the way it's been applied is, because that definition still is in the code and it is specifically allowed in other districts, large-scale retail is currently not allowed in Transect zones. And that's come up with certain things, in certain PDs, for example, like the Rural King on 13th Street. They're still a PD instead of a Transect zone, partially because they wouldn't be allowed if it was a Transect zone.
Right.
Well, the large-scale retail is fundamentally auto-oriented, and so it requires lots of parking and
Right.
stuff
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can feel comfortable pushing retail, knowing that. we're
Yeah,
not
just
gonna
so
get-
long as there's we
Large
make a
scale.
distinction between large-scale retail and
Right.
retail.
It sounds like that distinction's already in the Transects, so, okay, so I'm
And
good
the
with-
way
I'm
it's
good
been
with that.
applied, yeah.
Nothing against Rural King, they sell a lot of great stuff, but yeah, I don't know that we need it in Transect zones. We've not touched schools, and we're not gonna touch them here. I don't think scooter electric golf cart sales, that's hilarious, it's its own category.
I didn't see anything on the back page, honestly, that anybody mentioned as a priority.
No, I think on the back page, we can just say, none of it is a priority on that last page.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
And so that would be all of our priorities.
I have a broad question since we've opened it, but I've heard you guys mention so many times walkability. Do we have a specific definition for what that means?
Yes, I think the city has a definition of walkability, right?
Well, the city.
I'm curious how much consideration's gone into the fact that we live in Florida. It's like 90 degrees outside every single day. Like, just
Well-
how many people here, given the choice of driving their car 5 minutes versus walking in the middle of summer,
Here's
like,
the,
would ever do that?
here's the issue. If we all drive our cars all the time, we're all stuck in traffic.
Sure.
And if the University of Florida no longer provides any parking of note, 50,000 cars a day go to the University of Florida. It's better if all those students live in those tall buildings and walk to school or ride a bicycle to school.
Completely.
And many of us who have grown up in Florida are used to the heat. I mean, it's just what you
I also
do.
think there's plenty of hot climates that have walkability.
They do.
Well, and also I will just say that what we're talking about is there's big parts of the city that are not affected by this conversation that we're having right now. And actually, you can see it on that map is actually probably pretty helpful. So the circled areas are really what we're addressing right now. And so truthfully, there are large parts of Gainesville that are not walkable. Will they be walkable at some point? I don't know.
Not in your lifetime.
Probably not. And then there are parts, if you happen to live in Grove Street, close to downtown or by campus.
Our neighborhood is very, very walkable.
Right.
Yeah, and
so,
I've lived in College Park. I've lived in Bed and Breakfast District. Now I'm in Sugarfoot. Like I've
Right,
done the
Sugarfoot's
whole
another-
gamut,
yeah.
and so I feel like I've known the different areas and just obviously anecdotally, but these are parceled out. There's some neighborhoods where it's like, oh, we're putting in this thing and making it super walkable, and it's like no one's going there.
Well, right. I mean, I do think that,
And walkability takes time.
Walkability-
Fair,
Walkability
but like
takes
if we're not
time.
adding bike lanes, like I bike all the time, and there's been so much development where bike lanes weren't added, and it's like, cool, well, I can't go there now. That's no longer helpful for anyone.
that is a big problem. That is,
Or like sidewalks,
When-
lack of sidewalks.
That's
It's
why
not-
I always said that.
You've gotta-
I don't like to pick up something on Northwest 16th. 'Cause when I
There's a new transportation plan. We're talking about bikeability and walkability for
Okay.
and we're working on that.
yeah, we are. And in fact, it's funny that places you do see like near campus, a lot of those bike lanes and a lot of the sidewalk expansion is developer paid for. It's part of the project, which has been helpful. I bike everywhere too, so I'm with you. I hate the sidewalks that disappear. The worst one to me is North Main Street that just disappears right at the T-Mobile store at on 16th, and then forces you to go into traffic. Like,
Right.
Oh yeah,
I
like
think that's
Fourth
a-
Ave I
yeah.
did for years. I've
Yeah.
gotten almost hit by a car like probably at least a half dozen times.
Yeah, I mean-
Literally hit by a car one time, so.
Yeah.
Bike lanes are super important.
I totally agree. That has been a priority. I think a few members of the board are it's like very near and dear to our hearts.
Okay.
And I would just say that in encouraging more walkability, I think it's sort of implied that we would also,
Okay.
it's basically, if we can encourage people to drive less, that will make biking inherently safer.
That's fair.
But thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah,
And I always love talking about cycling. So.
I appreciate it. This has been
Yeah.
incredibly fascinating. So.
Well, I'm glad you
All right,
found it
I think
interesting.
it was kind of an.
Sounds like you need to apply for the next opening, which will
Yeah, I
happen in
guess
the
we can-
fall, and you can be on the plan board.
Maybe.
Um,
I love this city.
before we, do you want to go first, or should I?
I would love to just.
Yeah, please.
Halfway, probably more of a narrow point than anything, but. We do have sort of a definition in our comprehensive plan for the city for what walkable is. It doesn't have a walkable equals, but in our comprehensive plan, we have an objective that says all land development regulations that guide the transformation of shopping centers into walkable mixed-use neighborhood activity centers. And then it has five policies that say more detail of what that means. So we don't really have a definition of walkable is this, but it says our land development code should make things more walkable, and here are some things for what that means. And that's really what these guys, this board, if I'm being more formal, as I should be, that is what this board is discussing tonight. What does walkable mean?
Yeah, I can see a gray definition though, allowing the opportunity for developers to take advantage of what's allowed and not allowed. I think it's nice to think people are gonna come in and do nice things, but as a consultant, like I know
Right.
I'm gonna push as hard as I possibly can to get my client what they want, and I know all developers and consultants aren't gonna be like that, all lawyers too. Throw us all bad guys in there, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would say too that in concert with the city's tree mitigation policies, the city has some of the most aggressive tree mitigation policies, I think, in the state of Florida. And so the hope is that with
No
that.
one brought up
and-
trees.
Well, but trees do make things more walkable, right? If we got shade, and so I think that if we're just kind of zooming out, and looking at the big picture of walkability, I think that that's also a factor that's taken into consideration. Mr. Shepherd, this is, I will say, just for the record, this is unusual that we're letting people's.
Mr. Chair, I'm out of time.
You're-
I'm sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
We'll give you 3 minutes, and then I think we're gonna probably wrap up this meeting, because I think we've given city staff all that they need to move forward on this particular item.
Done member comment, I also have to, do you mind if I do member comment really quick? Because I also have to run.
Sure.
Thank you. All right,
Apologies, Mr.
so.
Shepherd.
Yeah, sorry, Mr.
Go ahead.
Shepherd. Last month, we voted to recommend denying a petition for the garden style apartment developer down on, actually it wasn't specific to a project, but the text amendment.
Right.
And I recall making a motion that was seconded by Nick that was going to continue the meeting so they could work with staff, the agents could work with staff on design standards specifically for the parking lots and their distribution. Am I remembering this correctly, Nick?
This was not last month, but the month before.
Oh, the month before, yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds right
Okay.
to me.
And also, I recall staff's recommendation, Ari, it was you. You wanted it to be in exchange for an affordability requirement, right? Like a.
That was part of it originally. They requested to move it to denial instead.
Yeah, but staff's recommendation was that, okay, well, you could do this if there's affordable units, right? And then I separately brought up and, threw it out there to the agents, maybe tying the number of surface parking spaces to the number of units, the number of bedrooms. And whether it was going back to the drawing board and talking about design standards, whether it was an affordable, especially the affordable housing component, or even tying the number of surface spaces to the number of units, the agents just said, no, we don't want to do that. Please, they asked us to deny. Didn't they ask us to deny?
They wanted to.
Oh, my memory's correct?
They
Okay, good.
wanted the process. They wanted.
They just
a
want to
definitive
continue the
answer.
process.
Yeah.
They're.
So I want to point out that they have now created this group that I cannot find incorporated anywhere called United for Better Communities, that is calling up not just organizers in this town, but organizers in Tallahassee, Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville. Yeah. And they're going around telling people that what this board voted to do was to, make it harder to build affordable housing, despite the fact that they rejected staff's proposal to do just that. Ari, you did great work on that, by the way. Thank you. So I would appreciate it if this board would allow me or the chair, if it's more appropriate, to go to the city commission meeting when this is being discussed to point out how they did not want to work with us or engage with us to provide advice, and how they turned around and are now harassing organizers. And I'm getting calls from my friends in other cities. Now
Well,
the record straight.
They lied to me on the phone. They were saying that we
Yeah.
were forcing parking minimums on them.
Right.
Yeah, so I just think when they're really going to be there, I think there should be a
I
representative
literally
of the planning
told them,
board.
I'm like, that's not what's happening.
Yeah, so I think there should be yeah, I agree. Or that's similar to what I'm told, they told other people.
Yeah, they called me.
So I think there should be a representative of the plan board there to set the record straight, because those agents are going to be there. And this is disingenuous.
Might I suggest it should be you? I think you made the motion. You've heard more, because I haven't heard a whole lot about them calling organizers, and so I think you've got more of the firsthand knowledge of it. Plus, you do make a very persuasive argument, Dr. Merber, if I do say so.
Thank you.
And so if you have the time, I would suggest it be you. If you don't, I think we're not even allowed to talk to each other about this stuff outside of.
Are you just asking
Yeah.
to be the representative of the plan board?
Yes, and
Yeah.
be able to say that I'm here on behalf of the plan board to tell you what
Yeah,
happened.
100%.
And bring up the three things, the one that staff recommended affordability, there was a motion made, seconded.
Do we need to vote on that then?
I would like to make it official.
Okay.
Okay.
So I move that I represent the plan board.
Yeah, I think you can do that as a board.
As a board, we can just vote for him to represent us at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think you would need to give the
Okay.
weight for whoever was going to go and speak to that.
So-
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Who's second?
I seconded it, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry to
Keep
run
pointing
that.
to me before I seconded.
Not a problem at all. This has been a longer meeting than I thought it would
Yeah.
be.
And thanks, Bernard. Really good work on that.
And that meeting is May 1st.
Oh, I'm there.
Okay.
But just to let everyone know.
This is why I thought Dr. Murmur would be most qualified to represent the board. Mr. Shepherd, thank you for your patience.
This is exactly what I wanted to talk about, is what I didn't hear tonight, is about parking in parks. Our Parks Department had a petition today about the Ballman Center, the different parks in the city that, don't have proper parking. They're parking along roads, and this here, they're blaming the planning department and in the codes department of how the parking was set up. And we got people parking in people's lawns and people selling people's lawns to others. This has been a big problem today. I mean, the shooting over there at the park on the east side was the biggest topic of our city commission meeting. This here, I think, is an issue that they're blaming our planning department because they didn't plan for them to have certain parking at certain areas and how many permits are issued and the special permits, why are they issued to certain people. This is something that you need to get with your commissioners about because this was a hot topic today. I would like to see more businesses come into town. You mentioned about businesses coming into town. So I love to see that. That's a major thing. We need to take and bring restaurants to town, like you said, and these gas stations. Any gas station that is gone out, then we need to have a plan for another gas station or some other kind of business to go in there. And this is what we're not hearing the public is not hearing of how the planning department, the zoning department, and the city commission is working together to take and make things happen. And you guys are like the major viewpoint for the public to like turn to say, this is how the planning department is making our city grow. The ladies here brought this issue about their area. That's another critical issue that the planning department and the zoning department are working supposed to be together to take and give us an outlook of what's gonna go there. And where's the letter of intent? I ain't heard these ladies or anybody else say, where's that letter of intent coming from the contractor or the person that's developing that area? That needs to be a must. So that's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. It was almost exactly 3 minutes. We're letting people talk. I will say it does seem dicey to sell a piece of land.
Thank you.
Future zoning.
It was interesting earlier that some of your members feel a little burned by the commission not following some of your advice. I'm sure you recall that you are advisory. So if you want final decisions, you have to join a committee that has the word authority in the name of it. They make their own final decisions. And as for the food services for the needy, you're talking about two vastly different facilities. There's scattered sites all over town where people form to actually receive the food, but that is sent out by the warehouse and distribution operation of Bread of the Mighty. So there's no long lines down the block for a place like Bread of the Mighty. What there is trucks, big trucks, frequent big trucks, and a big dumpster or a compactor. So there's two very different effects to consider there. What is up in this? Somebody's making noise. Oh, okay. Okay. I thought it was rats in the ceiling. My other comment, I think, is procedural. For instance, I look at this on the wall. It's absolutely meaningless without the interpretation that you got to have in front of you on the dais that we don't have out here. And I know the answer is it's in the backup, but there's only 2 of us out here on screen. So for the rest of us, you're our screen, you're our pixels, and we don't see what these circles mean. We're not seeing the details of all the transects you're talking about. Or maybe it goes to what the purpose of the meeting is. You know, this is on the notice of public meetings. If you wanted to have conversation with the people attending, that's one thing. If we're just here as flies on the wall, I'll back to my.
I'll add that this particular item is was brought as it's called a business discussion item. It's just brought for the board to discuss. Sunshine laws preclude us from discussing things outside of open and public meetings, and so this is our opportunity to kind of gauge interest on the board, gauge appetite on the board for some of the things that we talked about tonight. This will come back before the board as a voting item, which will then have a proper presentation that I think you're more used to seeing from city staff. It'll be much like actually what we saw for the first item with the daycares and libraries and single family. And I think that will be more easily digested. Obviously, there'll be more of a formal public comment period when that comes back. We're doing something a little unusual here, but y'all are here and you're asking questions, and who am I to say no, you know? So normally in a discussion item, the board is really just kind of discussing amongst ourselves. I will say most of the time the public finds it so incredibly boring that they don't stick around for this part. So it's a little bit of a delight to see people have interest in it. Well, it's great. I mean, a lot of people live here and do not care. So
For meeting in the evening when, as a working person, I can't attend.
this is the only way I could be on this board.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I work. I've got 2 kids. There's no way I can do this during the day. I was glad that Dr. Murmur volunteered to go to a city commission meeting because those things start early and they run long, and it is not easy for working folks to get there. Okay, this meeting can go on forever, and I don't want that to happen. So I think.
Any more member comment?
The one thing I just want to mention is that schedule that we developed. Is there anyone in charge of establishing a new schedule? I mean, because that schedule is based on a framework we're no longer using.
We just threw that out.
We did just throw it out.
Sorry.
Yeah, so that, well, I should let you discuss.
So
Did you develop that, or was that?
I think that was me.
Yeah, Mr.
Yeah.
Sanchez originally developed that schedule.
And then I think you've modified it. So here's what I would suggest that the items that I kind of tediously went through on that table that said were the most priority items, that becomes whatever is, you know, whenever we can get that realistically brought back before us to vote, that's the priority.
And I heard the grouping of those items, but I think the conversation kind of changed a little bit. Originally, or at one point, we were talking about grouping them under economic development and auto-oriented uses, but it seems like maybe it's more focused on the economic development part.
I think we want to do that first and then get into auto-oriented uses.
Yep.
Okay.
We're trying to, the hope is that, and you guys, again, please, we're asking you to do a lot of work, I understand it. We're trying to make it more digestible, not just for us as a board, because it was a lot to go through, but also for city staff to work on, to do the amount of care and research that it deserves, and then also for, obviously, the city commission to be able to process all that in a digestible way so that they can act on it accordingly.
Yeah, I think we can come back with a proposed revised timeline based on the discussion.
And I'm happy to work with you all too. If you need me to, chime in, I can, since we've done it now instead of zoning category as uses,
right.
We can go in and say, okay, well, I think, obviously the business focused stuff first, auto uses second, and then I can look through the uses here and suggest what maybe third or fourth or whatever down the line.
Member Sutton also brought up parking standards.
Parking standards should be, I think would be probably third on that list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreement.
Okay. The next meeting of the plan board will be May 22nd of this year. And with that,